That afternoon with my nephew was unlike any other, and it would be a day I'd never forget. The sun hung high in the sky, casting long golden rays over the surface of the pool, making the water glisten like diamonds. I was swimming leisurely, enjoying the solitude of a quiet day in the backyard. It had been a while since I'd had the house to myself. My partner had left for the weekend on a work trip, leaving me with some much-needed peace. At least that's what I thought. The water was cool against my skin, a perfect contrast to the summer heat that had turned the backyard into a personal oasis. I was in my own world, floating and letting my thoughts drift. The silence of the day was perfect, until it wasn't. Suddenly, I heard the gate to the backyard creak open, followed by the sound of footsteps on the hot stone tiles. I paused, confused and a bit startled. Who could it be? I wasn't expecting anyone. I turned toward the noise just in time to see my nephew, Jason, walking into the backyard with a wide smile on his face. He had come to stay with us for the summer, but I hadn't expected him back so early. He was supposed to be out with friends. "Hey, Uncle Dan!" Jason called out cheerfully, waving at me as he approached the pool. He was already wearing his swim trunks, looking like he had planned this. "Mind if I join you?" I wasn't sure what to say. Jason had grown up so much in the past few years. The last time I had really spent time with him, he had been an awkward teenager. But now, standing before me, he was different. Confident, athletic. His body filled out in ways that made him look more like a man than the boy I remembered. Sure," I said, trying to keep my voice casual even though I was taken aback by his sudden arrival. "I didn't know you were coming back so soon." Jason shrugged as he kicked off his sandals, stepping closer to the pool's edge. "Yeah, plans changed. Thought I'd come back and hang out here. Looks like I came at the perfect time." Without another word, he dove into the water gracefully, barely making a splash as he cut through the surface. I watched as he swam toward me, his movements strong and fluid. There was something captivating about the way he moved in the water, something I hadn't noticed before, and it left me feeling a bit uneasy. He surfaced beside me, his wet hair slicked back, droplets of water catching the sunlight. "I needed this," he said, his voice low and relaxed. "It's been a long day." I nodded, unsure of how to respond. The pool suddenly felt smaller with him there, the space between us charged with an energy I couldn't quite place. Jason seemed completely at ease, his usual friendly self, but there was something different about the way he looked at me now. His eyes lingered on mine a bit longer than usual, and I found myself growing more aware of his presence, of the proximity of our bodies in the water. For a few minutes, we swam in silence, the only sounds coming from the gentle splashes as we moved through the pool. I tried to push the strange feeling out of my mind, convincing myself it was just the surprise of seeing him so unexpectedly. But when Jason suddenly swam closer, that feeling intensified. He leaned against the side of the pool next to me, his shoulder brushing against mine in the water. "You've got a great setup here," he said, glancing around the backyard before his eyes flickered back to me. "I could stay out here all day." I laughed nervously, trying to keep the conversation light. "Yeah, it's nice. Good place to relax." Jason smiled, but there was something different in the way he looked at me now, something that made my heart beat a little faster, though I couldn't explain why. "You know, I've always looked up to you, Uncle Dan," he said suddenly, his voice soft but steady. "You've always been there for me, more than anyone else." I glanced at him, taken aback by the unexpected sincerity in his voice. "I'm glad to hear that," I said slowly. "But you know, you've grown into a pretty great guy yourself. You don't need me around all the time." He shook his head, his gaze never leaving mine. "That's not true. I've always needed you, and I still do." The way he said it made my chest tighten. There was something in his tone, in the way he looked at me, that made me feel like this was more than just a friendly conversation. But before I could respond, Jason's hand brushed against mine under the water. It was a light touch, accidental maybe, but it sent a jolt of electricity through me. I pulled my hand away quickly, my heart racing. "Jason, But he didn't move away. Instead, he stayed where he was, his eyes searching mine. "Is something wrong?" he asked quietly, his voice low and full of something I couldn't quite name. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. "No, it's just I wasn't expecting you to be here, that's all." Jason smiled again, but this time it felt different, more intimate, more deliberate. "I didn't mean to surprise you, but maybe it's a good thing I did." His words hung in the air between us, heavy and full of meaning I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. The space between us seemed to shrink even more, and I could feel the tension building with every second that passed. I wanted to say something, to break the moment before it went too far, but I couldn't find the words. All I could do was stare at him, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what was happening. But the story didn't end there. It was only the beginning. The air around us felt thicker now, heavy with a tension that hadn't been there before. Jason was still right next to me, the water rippling gently around us. His hand had only brushed mine for a second, but the feeling of it lingered, sending shivers down my spine that I couldn't ignore. I tried to shake the feeling off, telling myself it was just the surprise of the moment, but deep down I knew there was more to it than that. Jason wasn't the kid I used to know. He had grown up, more than I had realized. And now, standing here in the pool with him, everything felt different. Jason didn't move away. If anything, he seemed to settle into the space between us, making it clear he wasn't about to let this moment go. "I've missed spending time with you," he said, his voice low and casual, though there was an intensity behind it that I couldn't ignore. I forced a smile, trying to keep things light. "Yeah, well, it's been a busy year for both of us." He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "It has, but that's why I came back early today. I wanted to spend more time with you." I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. There was something about the way he said it that made my pulse quicken, and I could feel my body tense up, though I tried to play it cool. Before I could say anything, Jason shifted closer, his arm brushing against mine again. This time, the contact didn't feel accidental. It was intentional, deliberate, and it sent another jolt of electricity through me, leaving me breathless. "I've always felt close to you," he continued softly. "You've been more than just an uncle to me." His words hit me like a wave, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt a rush of emotions I didn't know how to process. There was something in the way he was looking at me, something I couldn't deny or ignore, no matter how hard I tried. "Jason," I started, but my voice caught in my throat. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to stop what was happening. But Jason wasn't finished. He turned fully toward me now, his body close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him, even in the cool water of the pool. "I've been thinking a lot about you lately," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I think I've been feeling something I don't know how to explain." The confession hung in the air between us, thick and heavy, and I felt my heart race even faster. I should have said something. I should have told him this wasn't right. But instead, I stood there, frozen as his words echoed in my head. "I know this might sound crazy," he continued, "but I can't stop thinking about you, and I don't know what to do with that." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Jason, you're my nephew. This isn't something we can—" But even as I said it, I could feel the words faltering. The truth was, I didn't know what to say. There was a part of me that was just as confused as he was, a part that couldn't deny the pull between us. Jason reached out, his hand gently resting on my arm. "I know it's complicated," he said quietly, "but I can't help how I feel, and I think you might feel it too." I wanted to pull away, to stop this before it went any further, but I couldn't. His touch was soft, warm, and it sent a rush of heat through me that I couldn't ignore. Every rational part of my mind was screaming at me to stop, to step back and end this, but my body wasn't listening. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time I saw the vulnerability there, the confusion, the uncertainty. He wasn't just trying to push boundaries. He was lost, just like me, unsure of how to navigate whatever was happening between us. "Jason, I began, my voice shaky. "This is complicated. We can't, we shouldn't. I know, he said softly, cutting me off. But it's already happening, isn't it? We're already here. His words sent a chill down my spine because I knew he was right. We were already standing on the edge of something neither of us could fully control, something we hadn't asked for but couldn't deny. I took a step back, trying to put some distance between us, but Jason didn't let go. His grip on my arm tightened just slightly, his touch gentle but firm. I'm not asking for anything, he said quietly. I need to know if I'm alone in this, if I'm the only one feeling it. His words hit me hard, and I felt my chest tighten with the weight of everything unsaid between us. I wanted to tell him it was all in his head, that he was just confused, but I couldn't. The truth was I had felt it too, the pull, the connection, the way things had changed between us. But how could I admit that? How could I let this go any further? Before I could respond, Jason's hand slid from my arm to my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine under the water. The touch sent a shockwave through me, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. "Please," he whispered, his voice filled with a quiet desperation. "Just tell me I'm not crazy." I looked at him, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I could feel the tension between us building, rising with every second that passed, and I knew that whatever I said next would change everything. But the story didn't end there. My mind was racing, screaming that this had to stop, but the rest of me was still caught in the moment, in the intensity of his gaze, in the feel of his hand in mine. "You're not crazy," I finally whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. As soon as I said it, I knew everything was about to change. Jason's eyes softened, a flicker of relief passing through them as he held my gaze. "I knew it," he said softly, his voice full of emotion. I knew I wasn't the only one feeling this. I wanted to pull away, to end the moment before it went any further, but I couldn't. There was something about the way he was looking at me, something in the way his fingers held mine, that made it impossible to walk away. The tension between us wasn't just in my head, it was real, tangible, and it had been there all along. I'd just been too afraid to acknowledge it. "Jason," I began, my voice trembling, "we can't." But before I could finish, he took a step closer, his body now inches from mine. The heat between us was undeniable, the closeness overwhelming. His free hand came up, gently brushing a wet strand of hair from my face, and I felt a shiver run down my spine at the tenderness of the gesture. "I don't care if it's complicated," he whispered, his voice low and steady. "I don't care if it's wrong." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. The logical part of my mind was screaming at me to stop this, to push him away, but my body wasn't listening. Every nerve in my body was on high alert, buzzing with the electricity of the moment. I couldn't deny it any longer. There was something between us, something powerful and real, and I was no longer sure I could resist it. "We shouldn't be doing this," I said, though my voice lacked the conviction I wanted it to have. Even as I said the words, I knew I didn't mean them. Jason's hand slid from my face to my shoulder, his touch soft and hesitant. "Maybe we shouldn't," he agreed quietly, "but we are." His words sent a jolt through me, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. There was no going back now. We were standing on the edge of something dangerous, something we could never take back, and the longer we stood there, the harder it became to turn away. I could feel my resolve slipping away, melting under the heat of his touch and the intensity of his gaze. Every logical thought I had was drowned out by the pounding of my heart and the rush of adrenaline that surged through my veins. I knew we were crossing a line we could never uncross, but in that moment I didn't care. Without thinking, I leaned in, closing the distance between us. Our lips met in a soft, hesitant kiss, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The kiss was gentle at first, cautious, as if we were both testing the waters. But as soon as our lips touched, something inside me snapped. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more intense. Jason's arms wrapped around me, pulling me closer, and I felt myself sink into the warmth of his embrace. Every inch of my body was buzzing with the thrill of it. the forbidden nature of what we were doing only adding to the intensity. For a moment, time seemed to stop. It was just the two of us lost in the heat of the moment, the world around us fading away. The pool, the backyard, the bright summer day, all of it disappeared, leaving only the feeling of Jason's lips on mine, the warmth of his body pressed against me. But as the kiss continued, reality began to creep back in. The weight of what we were doing started to settle over me, and I felt a pang of guilt twist in my stomach. This wasn't just a moment of passion. This was something bigger, something that could change everything. I pulled back, breathless and wide-eyed, my heart pounding in my chest. Jason looked at me, his expression filled with a mix of longing and confusion. "What's wrong?" he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. This is too much," I said, my voice shaking. "We can't keep going like this." Jason's face fell and I could see the disappointment in his eyes. I thought you felt it too." "I do," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "But that doesn't make it right." He sighed, his hand still resting gently on my shoulder. "I know it's not easy," he said quietly. "But I don't think I can just pretend this didn't happen." His words hit me hard and I felt a lump form in my throat. I didn't know what to do. Every part of me wanted to dive back into the kiss to let the moment carry us away, but I knew we couldn't. This wasn't just a fleeting moment of desire. It was something much more complicated, something that could break us both if we weren't careful. "We need to stop," I said, though the words felt hollow even as I said them. "We need to figure out what this means before we do something we can't take back." Jason nodded slowly, his eyes filled with emotion. "You're right," he said softly, though I could hear the reluctance in his voice. "But this isn't over." I looked at him, my heart heavy with the weight of his words. He was right. This wasn't over. Whatever was happening between us wasn't going away, and the kiss had only made that clearer. But the story didn't end there, as Jason said, "This isn't over." And I knew he was right. What had just happened between us, what had been building for days, couldn't simply be undone. I stood there, the water rippling softly around us, my mind racing with everything that had just transpired. I took a deep breath, trying to collect myself, trying to figure out what to say next. But before I could respond, Jason gave me a final lingering look before pulling away, swimming toward the edge of the pool. He hoisted himself out with ease, water dripping from his body as he grabbed a towel from a nearby chair. "I think I'm gonna head inside," he said softly, avoiding my eyes. There was something vulnerable about him at that moment, something I hadn't seen before. He was struggling just as much as I was. "Yeah, I think that's a good idea," I muttered, my voice barely audible. I watched as he wrapped the towel around his waist and walked toward the house, his broad shoulders tense with the weight of everything left unsaid. As soon as he disappeared inside, I exhaled a shaky breath, running a hand through my wet hair. The cool water had once been refreshing, but now it felt stifling, like it was dragging me down into something I couldn't control. I needed to get out, to clear my head. Climbing out of the pool, I grabbed a towel and sat on the edge, letting the sun warm my skin. I needed to think. I needed to figure out how everything had gone so far, so fast. What had started as a normal day had spiraled into something much more complex, and now nothing felt certain. I couldn't stop replaying the moment when Jason's lips had met mine. I had been the one to lean in, to cross that line. I had given in to the tension between us, and now I had to face the consequences. But even as guilt gnawed at me, I couldn't deny the spark that had ignited between us. It had been real, undeniable, and that was what terrified me the most. A part of me wanted to run inside, to find Jason, to talk about what had happened, to figure out what it all meant. But another part of me knew that we needed space. We both needed time to process what had happened before things went too far. I stood up, wrapping the towel around my waist, and headed inside. The house was quiet, too quiet, and I could feel the tension in the air lingering from our encounter. Jason was nowhere to be seen, and I assumed he had gone to his room. That was probably for the best. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I tried to busy myself with mundane tasks, laundry, tidying up the house, but no matter what I did, my mind kept drifting back to Jason, to the way he had looked at me, the way his touch had felt. The house felt stifling, and I knew I needed to get out to clear my head. I decided to go for a walk, hoping the fresh air would help me think. As I stepped out into the warm evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. The world around me felt different, even though nothing had really changed at all. The tension I had been trying to avoid had now taken root, and I wasn't sure how to deal with it. As I walked, my mind wandered back to the conversation Jason and I had in the pool. He had been so honest, so open about his feelings, and I had been the one to lean into that moment. I hadn't stopped it. I had encouraged it. I was just as responsible for what had happened as he was. By the time I returned to the house, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the backyard. I felt more conflicted than ever, but I knew that avoiding Jason wasn't the answer. We needed to talk about what had happened, to figure out where we stood. Taking a deep breath, I headed inside. The house was still quiet, and for a moment I wondered if Jason was avoiding me too. But then I heard the soft sound of footsteps coming from upstairs, and I knew I couldn't avoid this any longer. I found him in the living room, sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. He looked up when he saw me, and I could see the same confusion and uncertainty in his eyes that I felt. "Hey," I said softly, stepping into the room. "Hey," he replied, his voice low and tired. We stood there in silence for a moment, neither of us knowing what to say. Finally, Jason broke the tension. "I've been thinking about what happened earlier," he began, his voice shaky. "I don't know what to make of it." I nodded, moving to sit on the couch across from him. "Neither do I admitted. "But we need to talk about it. We can't just pretend it didn't happen." Jason looked at me, his eyes full of uncertainty. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. The question caught me off guard. Did I regret it? The answer wasn't as simple as I wanted it to be. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I regret that things got so complicated, but I don't regret the moment itself." Jason's eyes softened and he looked down at his hands. "I don't know what I was expecting," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I didn't expect this to feel so intense." "Neither did I admitted. "But we need to figure out what this means before we do anything else." Jason nodded, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. "I know we can't keep going like this," he said softly, "but I don't want to lose what we have, whatever this is." I sighed, leaning back against the couch. "We need time," I said. "Time to figure out what's happening between us and time to decide what to do next." Jason looked at me, his expression serious. "Yeah, I think you're right." We sat there in silence, the weight of our conversation pressing down on both of us. There were no easy answers, no simple solutions. But at least we had agreed to take a step back, to give ourselves space to figure out what came next. As I stood up to leave, Jason reached out, grabbing my hand for a brief moment. "I don't want this to be the end," he said softly. I needed you to know that." I looked down at him, feeling the same conflicting emotions swirling inside me. "I know," I said quietly. "We'll figure it out." And with that, I left the room, the weight of everything that had happened still heavy on my shoulders. But for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. We hadn't solved anything, but at least we had taken the first step toward understanding what had happened between us. But the story didn't end there. Not yet. The days that followed were a blur of confusion, tension, and awkward moments. Jason and I tried to return to some semblance of normalcy, but the weight of what had happened hung over us like a cloud. It was impossible to ignore the subtle shifts in our interactions, the stolen glances, the silence that now seemed to linger longer than it should. I found myself tiptoeing around the house, careful not to cross paths with him too often, and when we did end up in the same room, the air felt thick with unsaid words. Every time our eyes met, I felt that same pull, that same spark of something forbidden, and I knew Jason felt it too. But neither of us said anything. We couldn't. One afternoon, a few days after the pool incident, I found myself sitting alone on the porch trying to clear my head. The sun was setting, casting a soft orange glow across the yard, and I tried to focus on the peacefulness of the moment. But my mind kept drifting back to Jason. How had things gotten so complicated so quickly? I had always been close to him, but I'd never imagined it would turn into this, a confusing mix of emotions and desires that I didn't know how to handle. As if on cue, Jason appeared in the doorway, his shadow stretching long across the porch. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped outside, closing the door behind him. I tensed up slightly, unsure of what to expect. "Mind if I sit with you?" he asked, his voice quiet. I nodded, gesturing to the chair next to me. He sat down, the silence between us thick but not uncomfortable. We sat there for a while, neither of us speaking, just watching the sun dip lower in the sky. After what felt like an eternity, Jason finally broke the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he said softly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. I turned to look at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Yeah, me too." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what to do. I don't know how to stop feeling this way." I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. The truth was, I didn't know how to stop feeling it either. Every time I thought about him, about what had happened between us, a part of me wanted to lean into it to let myself feel whatever this was. But I knew it wasn't that simple. "We can't keep going like this," I said quietly. "It's not right. We both know that." Jason nodded, his expression troubled. "I know, but what are we supposed to do? Pretend it never happened?" I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "Maybe that's what we need to do, give ourselves space, figure out what we really want." Jason looked at me then, his eyes filled with a mix of frustration and longing. "And what if what I want is you?" His words hit me hard, and I felt a lump form in my throat. I had known deep down that this was how he felt, but hearing him say it out loud made it real. It made everything so much more complicated. "You're confused," I said, though the words felt hollow. "This isn't... we can't." Jason shook his head, his expression firm. "I'm not confused, Uncle Dan. I know what I'm feeling. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." I looked away, unable to meet his gaze. My mind was spinning, torn between what I knew was right and what I felt in my heart. Jason was so young, so full of emotions he didn't fully understand yet. But I couldn't deny that I felt something too, something that scared me more than anything else. "This is just a phase," I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. "You'll move on from this, Jason. You'll find someone your own age, someone who's right for you." But Jason wasn't having it. He leaned forward, his eyes burning with intensity. "And what if that someone is you?"